Alright, in this video we're looking at the last section of our book 42.3 and 42.5. And we're going to finish out our ecology unit talking about energy transfer between organisms in an ecosystem. So last time we looked at productivity, right? Primary, net, and gross. So how we quantify the total energy in an ecosystem. But of course that energy doesn't just stay in one spot. It doesn't just stay in the plants, doesn't just stay in the animals. It flows through the ecosystem. It is transferred from organism to organism, and some is also lost because that exchange is inefficient. And we're going to look at that today. So one of the main things we need to remember is the energy transfer between different parts in an ecosystem is very inefficient. So we talked about primary productivity last time. So the amount of energy that a plant, a autotroph, captures from the sun and then converts into chemical energy. That's primary productivity. Well, then consumers, like vegetarians, animals, plants, vegetarian humans, or let's say herbivores, if we're talking about animals, eat that plant mass, those producers. They consume them, and that energy goes into them for them to utilize, and that's called secondary production. So the chemical energy in a consumer's food that's used to produce new biomass. So new biomass, that's like more animals or organisms or anything like that, more tissue. That's the secondary production. So for example, I've got this picture up here of a caterpillar eating a plant. The plant material, this is our primary product. Some of this energy goes into the caterpillar to cause it and some of that energy is used in cellular respiration. Some of it is just excreted in feces and waste, but some of it is goes into growing the caterpillar, making it bigger. And this is our secondary product, or secondary production. It's what actually goes into the caterpillar from what it eats to make it bigger, not that it just excretes again or it uses just to stay alive. So like we said, not all potential energy in a food source will be converted into new biomass. It doesn't all go out to make this organism bigger. Some of it is lost through feces, some of it is used up just to keep it alive, the blood flowing, the lungs going in and out. And the rest of it is lost as heat due to the inefficiency of transfer from the leaf into the caterpillar. And this efficiency of transforming potential chemical energy in the leaf, primary product to secondary product, is called production efficiency. All right. And for different animals, production efficiency can vary. For humans and other mammals, it's about 1 to 2%. That's because we use a lot of this extra energy that doesn't go into increasing our size or new growth to heat our body. That's most endotherms, warm-blooded creatures, use a lot of this excess energy, require a lot of excess energy to keep our body at a constant temperature. Exotherms, like snakes, amphibians, insects that are cold-blooded, are much more efficient, 40% production efficiency, which means they use 40% of this the potential energy in the food they eat to create secondary product. In fact, this transfer of energy is so inefficient that only about 10% of the chemical energy stored in each trophic level is available or passed on to the next. So for example, if all the plants in a specific environment have 10,000 joules of stored chemical energy, and the primary consumers like the grasshoppers, things like that, that eat the plants would eat all of the plant biomass and convert it to energy, they would only be able to gain a total of 1,000 joules from that 10,000 joules of energy that were in the original primary producer. So we only pass on 10% here. And the same thing, sorry, my pen is malfunctioning here. Shoot. And the same thing happens when we go from primary consumer to secondary consumer. Only about 10% is passed on. And when we go from secondary consumer to tertiary consumer, only 10% is passed on. So if you're at the very top, you get, of what was totally available, 10%, 1%, 0.1% of the total available energy at the base of this ecosystem do you even is available for you. That is why you here in Wisconsin, you see fields upon fields of feed corn being grown. What does it feed? Not humans, not directly, animals. Every pound of meat requires 10 pounds of corn to raise, to produce, to keep healthy, to produce, to grow, to eventually kill, to slaughter, to make meat. Not really used to doing this, but this is one pitch I'll have for vegetarianism, is the fact that you are able to more directly access all of the stored energy in plant matter or in an ecosystem by eating plants. If you're at the tertiary consumer level, if you are a carnivore, if you just eat meat, you are in the hands of all of these steps of the trophic level. If something would happen here, you're starving. If something would happen here, you're starving. Just want to keep you aware of that. And secondly, chemical and nutrients cycle through the environment. So many nutrients in an ecosystem are continually being cycled or recycled as organisms take them up through eating them or in their roots, as would be the case for plants. And then they release them in waste products and byproducts as heat, or when they die and they decay in their flesh and all those nutrients go back to the soil. For many nutrient cycles, decomposers are key, so decomposing dead plant matter or dead organisms, they return nutrients stored in dead biomass back to the environment. Otherwise, that leaf litter, dead logs, dead organisms would just pile up and just stay there, and they would trap nutrients in and they'd never go back to the environment. So nutrient cycles, how quickly nutrients can go from being in the environment into living things and back to the environment, is limited by the volume of decomposers. Temperature, humidity, and other factors can limit decomposer growth, and because of that, it can limit how quickly nutrients are able to cycle through an environment. So as an example, deforestation and other disruptions in ecosystem can really drastically impact the nutrient cycle. For example, there are tons of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus stored in trees, mainly in the trunks, in the bark, in the heartwood. That doesn't recycle very often. For example, in oak forests, that the oak trees can live to be hundreds of years. They're storing a lot of nutrients in those tree trunks, nitrogen, phosphorus, that stays there for a long time. So if the environment, like this forest, is used to having a very low level of nitrates, because a tree might die, it might spike, many more might grow, it might dip, a bunch of trees storm, might die, though that nitrate is released in decomposing stumps, it might rise. But generally, normally, the nitrate level stays pretty stable. When we deforest an area, all of a sudden we're killing, and then especially if we don't remove the trunks right away, the trees, that nitrate spikes. And what a spike in nitrate will do is cause an imbalance in the ecosystem, a flood of nitrates that can cause irregular succession in the environment. And also, now there's not these tree roots or plant roots on this hillside, for example, to soak up water. Water runoff carries all those nitrates back into the lake or the river or the stream and eutrophies the lake or the river or the stream. So we as humans have a big effect on these nutrient cycles. So I'm going to briefly go through some of them. For example, the water cycle. We have here how water in lakes and rivers and streams evaporates in the atmosphere. Water from plants through evapotranspiration goes back in the atmosphere. From organisms through respiration goes back in the atmosphere, where it condenses in the clouds and then eventually precipitates back over land or over the ocean. And over land, the water can run back off into the ocean. And this runoff, this is where a lot of nutrients from the soils or toxins or contaminants that we as humans place on land can make it back into the ocean and pollute that environment there. We also have the carbon cycle. So carbon is in all living things, plants, animals, fish. When they die or when they excrete waste products, it returns back to the soil or to the water. And decomposers decompose it, put it back into the soil. Also, when we breathe out, exhale carbon dioxide, it goes back into the atmosphere. As well as when we burn fossil fuels, it goes back into the atmosphere. Photosynthesis is the big thing in plankton and in plants that bring carbon back into organisms. And photosynthesis can only take a certain amount of carbon back out of the atmosphere. When we burn fossil fuels and put an excess carbon back into the atmosphere, the plants, the photosynthesizers, can't take it out fast enough and it begins to build up here. And that's where global warming comes from. And then, of course, the carbon goes back into animals by when they eat the plants and take in that carbon. Nitrogen cycle is really important. Our atmosphere is about 72% nitrogen gas, but animals and plants can't use nitrogen gas as it is. It needs to be fixed or turned into nitrates. Lightning can fix nitrogen into nitrates. Nitrogen that's dissolved in water can be fixed in the aquatic cycling by bacteria or in soil. Legumes have nitrogen fixing nodules on them, and also ammonifying bacteria turns nitrogen into ammonia. And in both cases, this ammonia and these nitrates can be taken up by plants and assimilated into protein in plants. And then when animals eat the plants, they can take in that nitrogen, or when they eat each other's, they take in that nitrogen. And then when they urinate or defecate or die, that nitrogen is decomposed back into the soil. And lastly, there is the phosphorus cycle. So phosphorus is also really important. You'll see, much like nitrogen, phosphorus can be recycled. However, it relies on geologic processes as well, like geological uplift. It can be present in rocks, and wind-blown rocks or weathering occurs. It can be brought into waterways, or wind-blown dust can kind of accumulate some of that phosphorus in rainwater that then rains down back on plants and things like that. So just a cursory, a very basic understanding of the cycles. Water, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus are the most important. Specific names of like nitrifying bacteria or modifying bacteria or nitrogen fixing or phosphorus fixing fungi aren't important, but just a general understanding of how these cycles work and how they interact. All right, I'll see you in class next time.